that have worked tirelessly on these investigations over the past week, and I will give particular shout-outs to many of them as we go through this press conference. But we called this press conference for the purpose of announcing that additional charges have been filed against Paul Caneiro this morning, and he's been served with those charges while he's detained at the Monmouth County Correctional Institute here in Freehold. We have charged defendant Caneiro with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated arson, 1 count of possession of a firearm for an unlawful purpose, and 1 count of possession of a knife for an unlawful purpose. These charges that were filed this morning are in addition to the charge that was filed last week out of Ocean Township for the alleged aggravated arson of the defendant's own home. And by filing these charges, the state alleges that the defendant murdered his brother Keith Caneiro and Keith's entire family, his 2 children, Sophia and Jesse, and his wife Jennifer, during the early morning hours of Tuesday, November 20th. Specifically, we allege that the defendant repeatedly shot and killed his brother while he was outside of the side of his home, and then moved to murder the rest of the family inside the home. We allege that Jennifer was shot and stabbed, and the 2 Caneiro children were repeatedly stabbed by knife. We also allege that after murdering the Caneiro family, the defendant then set fire to the house at 15 Willowbrook in Colts Neck in an effort to conceal and disguise his earlier committed crimes. Now, as I mentioned, the defendant was served with these charges this morning, and he will have an initial appearance and detention hearing for these charges, as well as the charges that were filed last week on the aggravated arson out of Ocean Township. That hearing will be held before the Honorable James McGann at the Monmouth County Superior Court tomorrow at 9 a.m. As for the status of the medical examiner's investigation, Keith Caneiro's cause and manner of death was ruled to be multiple gunshot wounds by homicide. Jennifer, Jesse, and Sophia's cause and manner of death remain open, pending toxicology reports. But as I mentioned last week when we spoke about this case, it is the state's position and allegations that they were the victims of homicidal violence, as indicated by the charges that were filed today. The cause of the 2 fires at the Ocean Township home and the Colts Neck home has been determined to be arson by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And ATF has further determined that the origin of the Colts Neck fire was in the basement, and the origin of the Ocean Township fire was 2 exterior locations at each end of the house in Ocean Township. Now, there's been extensive speculation about a timeline or order of events as it pertained to the fires in these 2 towns. We allege that the Colts Neck incident happened in the early morning hours of last Tuesday, November 20th. We also allege that the defendant returned to his house in Ocean Township with certain items of evidence that he retained from the Colts Neck crime scene. And I can't provide any further description as to that type of evidence because of the ethical and legal rules that constrain us. From there, we allege the defendant intentionally set fire in his home at or about 5 a.m. for the purpose of both destroying evidence of his earlier crimes in Colts Neck and to also create the illusion that the overall Caneiro family was somehow victimized or targeted. We allege that it was a ruse. Now, understandably, many have questioned and wondered about a motive to these alleged crimes. Based on our investigation to date, we believe that the defendant's motive was financial in nature, stemming from his and the victim's joint business ventures that they owned and operated out of Asbury Park. As a result, we have also launched a financial investigation into the business and financial dealings of the defendant. Now, with these types of investigations, they take time. So I won't be able to provide any further information as to motive at this point in time. But I would encourage you to continue to follow this case as it proceeds through the criminal justice system. As court appearances occur, there will likely be information that's presented on the record by the state in this case. Bringing together a case like this takes a true team effort. And I'm honored to be joined by some of the agency heads, detectives, and prosecutors, all of whom played a vital role in bringing this case to a head with these charges today. The investigation necessarily required the support of a number of law enforcement partners who stand with me here today, and I would like to personally commend them and give them our thanks. The Colts Neck Police Department, represented by Acting Chief Frank Lissess. The Ocean Township Police Department, represented by Chief Steve Peters. The Monmouth County Sheriff's Office, represented by Sheriff Sean Golden. The New Jersey State Police, represented today by Lieutenant Colonel Scott Ebner and Major Mike Kane. The New Jersey Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory, represented by Deputy Director Lieutenant Cy Blystein. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, represented today by Special Agent in Charge John DeVito. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, represented by Special Agent in Charge Greg Erie. The Monmouth County Fire Marshals, who represent the entire fire community, who's here today represented by Kevin Stout. And then finally, so many members of my investigative and legal staff at the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, some of whom join me up here today. These individuals and so many others spent countless hours and continue to spend countless hours working on these investigations. I want to convey my sincere thanks and gratitude to those involved in this case who worked tirelessly, particularly through the Thanksgiving holiday, to solve this case and bring these charges to fruition today. These were your finest days, ladies and gentlemen, and this is your finest hour. And it is my greatest honor to work with you in the law enforcement community as we stand here today. I'm humbled by your partnership, and I look forward to that continuing on through this case and any other case that comes through Monmouth County. As to our cases, they remain active and ongoing. And to that end, anyone in the public with information on these matters or any others that might relate to the Colts Neck or arson incidents, I would encourage you to contact law enforcement. If it involves the Colts Neck incident, please call Monmouth County Detective Pat Petrozello at 800-733-7443 or Colts Neck Detective Richard Zarillo at 732-780-7323. If it involves the Ocean Township case, please contact Monmouth County Detective Brian Weisbrot at 800-733-7443 or Ocean Township Detective Chris Brady at 732-531-1800. And as to those 4 detectives that are running the point on these 2 investigations that stand up here behind me today, I want to commend you on your outstanding work and thank you on behalf of a grateful county and a grateful law enforcement community. Finally, to the victim family members and the friends of the Caneiro family and to the entire Colts Neck community, it's not lost upon us how troubling and confusing this incident has been to you and how unusual these circumstances are as alleged. Our collective hearts in the law enforcement community go out to you for the loss of Keith, Jennifer, Jesse, and Sophia. In this case, we started strong thanks to this team effort, and I want those victims and those community members and friends to know that we're going to finish this case strong too. We won't stop until we bring justice in the name of Keith Caneiro and his entire lovely family. For further updates on these charges as they proceed through the criminal justice process, please continue to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, at our webpage. Our Twitter handle is @MoncoProsecutor. And as of Monday, anybody in the community or the public is able to download a free app under the Monmouth County Prosecutor's name that will share with you all things relating to Monmouth County law and public safety, to include this case. And with that, I'll take questions, do the best I can to answer them under these limited circumstances. Brian.
Can you at all make sense out of why someone would go, if it's a financial issue between 2 brothers, why would he kill the mother and 2 children, the wife and his father?
Look, Brian, I get questions like that all the time. I have 2 answers for you. The first is I have to defer to the evidence that's going to be presented at trial if this case gets indicted by a grand jury. The second is I can't read what's in a person's, or in this case, a defendant's head. Motive is not an element of these crimes, but it is something that we will be presenting to a jury one day if this case is returned as a true bill. That's the best I can offer you right now. Yes, sir.
Chris, could you, you mentioned you cannot really go into the motive. You said it was financial, but can you talk at all about what led you guys to kind of look in that direction, even generally speaking?
Well, you recall last week there was a great effort that was undertaken by the fire community here in Monmouth County. It took nearly a day for that scene to be secured at Colts Neck. And after it was, and it was rendered sound by county engineers, I have fabulous investigators that have worked with us on this case and at the Ocean Township case. The only thing I can say is that we recovered a great deal of evidence, and that evidence is being analyzed as we speak here today by many of the agencies that are represented by these partners behind me. I can't comment substantively on the quality or quantum of our proofs. The only thing I can say is that at this point in the stage, we're confident in our proofs, or else we wouldn't have charged this case the way we did. And the only thing I can tell you is just to continue to follow this case. As there are future court appearances, then information will be presented during those appearances as part of the public record. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of a financial motive, now that Paul Caneiro has been charged with the murders and the arson at the Colts Neck house, do you believe your investigation will stem outward further into financial crimes and organized crime in terms of, establishing more of a reason that there was a financial motive?
No, that's a fair question. At this point in time, remember, we are just assessing motive and we're conducting a financial investigation. I don't have any reason to believe that I can't tell you if charges are or are not coming. As to the angle that you mentioned about organized crime, we have no reason to believe that there's any aspect of organized crime involved in these two investigations. And that's in partnership with not just county and state law enforcement agencies, but in our partnership with federal law enforcement agencies. But I qualify that by saying this case, as is every other case, they are fluid. So this is an active and ongoing investigation. Yes, sir.
Has the suspect been cooperating with you? What's his demeanor like? How difficult has it been to build the case against him?
Well, the suspect has been in jail since we charged him last week. So by virtue of that, because he's incarcerated pending trial, he has to be cooperative. As far as the service of charges go, they occurred this morning without incident. Yes, ma'am.
Did he target his family? Did he try to kill his wife and his kids? And after these charges, are they still standing behind him?
I couldn't speak to what the family is or is not doing on behalf of the defendant, but as I mentioned, we charged the defendant with aggravated arson of his own home last week. So we allege that because it's a second-degree crime, we allege that his family was put in danger by virtue of that. That said, today I've shared that it is our theory and belief that that fire was effectively a ruse designed to make it appear as if the overall Caneiro family was somehow targeted. Yes, sir, in the back.
Chris, so on the timeline, so he kills Keith and his family, that's overnight, and then he goes back to his house and sets a fire to hide the evidence. When does he start the fire back in Colts Neck, though? Does he do that early and then you don't see it till 12:38, or?
Now, that's a fair question. We allege he started the fire in the early morning hours of Tuesday, November 20th, after he allegedly murdered Keith Caneiro and his family. Now, it's a fair point about the fire not being reported at 12:38. Based on what we know from cause of origin of that fire, it was started in the basement. It continued to smolder until when there was entry made into the home, a great deal of oxygen coming into the home effectively fed that fire. So it wasn't reported until 12:38, and what we believe caused the fire to catch on from there is likely the feeding of oxygen as the house was entered into.
So he had started the fire after he killed them early in the morning before coming back home to start the second fire?
That is the state's allegations and position at this time. Yes, sir.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
the evidence that he took with him after the murders, I know you can't provide many details about it, but is it possible that perhaps this was stolen property, something that he took with him that when the first time he went to the home, he didn't bring with him?
We have no reason to believe that it was stolen property at this time. Yes, sir. I can't comment on that at this point in time. I'm sorry. Alex, you had a question?
Yeah, what kind of punishment is Paul facing?
Well, the first-degree murder charges, each of them carry 30 years to life. So the maximum penalty is life imprisonment. Yes, ma'am.
Can you say anything about how long he may have planned this, how premeditated? Was it 24 hours? Was it a month?
It's a good question. I wish I could answer it. I can't. I would just encourage you to follow this case as it proceeds through the criminal justice system. Yes, sir. Hey, Alex.
Can you specify where in the house the three victims were found and how Paul Caneiro had control of all three of them at once?
I missed the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
How Mr. Caneiro may have controlled his three alleged victims at the same time?
I can't comment on the placement in terms of where they were found inside the home. That would be evidentiary. And the other part of your question, I'm sorry, I still didn't catch it. What is it again?
It would seem that he was able to keep control over all three of them at once, since they were all found in the house. I was wondering how he might have, maintained control of them and kept them within the house before he was able to
Or were they asleep?
The only thing I can comment on at this point in time is what I mentioned earlier, which is we allege that he shot and killed his brother when the brother came outside the home, and then he returned inside the home where he allegedly murdered the other three family members.
So are you saying that this was planned over a period of time? Was it a spontaneous
I can't comment on that at all. I'm so sorry. Yes, ma'am.
What type of business then, joint business ventures did they have in Asbury Park?
They ran a technology company based out of Asbury Park, but it also was a pest control company, so it basically served two purposes. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit more about the financial investigation? Are you just looking into Paul's finances or also into the company's finances?
I can't go any further at this point in time because it's in infancy stages, but stay
And
tuned.
is that launched by the prosecutor's office? Or
Yes, it's by our financial crimes and public corruption section that we have here in the office. Yes, ma'am.
How come, what about any security video, neighbors, or what happened with the family security system? Can you confirm that?
Look, I can't comment on that at this point in time, but as I mentioned earlier, we thankfully collected a great deal of evidence that is being forensically examined as we speak now, but I can't confirm or deny that that type of evidence was collected. Yes, sir.
You're the prosecutor.
Yes.
You deal with heavy-duty stuff all the time, I'm sure. This is particularly heinous and horrible, it would seem. As a person, when you have to deal with something like this, you know, the murders of a wife and kids, the guy shot in the head. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects you and your team?
Yeah, I can. If these allegations are proven true, regardless of whether or not the defendant did it, because he is entitled to his constitutional protections, we work for the state and for the government without passion or prejudice, but this one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here. And I know that the entire team of investigators and people involved in working on this case, the fire officials, that they've struggled with this too. But I guess if there is a silver lining at all, even though they struggled with it, as I mentioned earlier, they did an absolutely outstanding job, and for that reason, it's one of my proudest moments that I've had in my life.
Was the
Yes, sir.
suspect in some way ill or out of work or not able to work leading up to this? Is that part of what?
I couldn't comment on that. I couldn't confirm or deny it. I'm sorry. Yes, sir, in the back.
Now, Paul goes back to his house and sets it on fire with his own family in there. Is he going to be charged with attempting to kill his own family too? Did he try to kill them also in that fire?
I couldn't comment on charges, what might or might not come from this point in time. It really depends on how our investigation unfolds. Yes, ma'am.
Is that part of it though? Is that a part of it?
Again, I couldn't even begin to speculate it, and I have to let my team do their thing, do their forensic and examination and analysis, undertake the financial investigation before I could even get there.
His wife and kids were in the house when the fire started.
Yes, yes, sir, that's what we allege. Yes, ma'am.
Has Paul expressed any interest in attending the family funerals?
Uh, not-
Asked for any leniency in being able to attend it out of jail or anything?
You know, that's a question I would probably direct to his legal counsel. I don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Was there any kind of toxicology done on Paul, and if so, can you share what the results were?
There was no toxicology done because his remains were recovered outside the home and they weren't burned. So part of the reason the medical examiner has to conduct a toxicology is because of the condition of the 3 remaining bodies inside. Oh, you said Paul. I'm so sorry. No, I couldn't even begin to comment on it. I apologize. Yes, ma'am.
Are you absolutely certain that he acted alone? Did anyone help him plan this, or was just jump into this spur of the moment?
Based on the evidence and the investigation we've conducted to date, we are confident that it was just the defendant acting alone as alleged by the charges filed today. Brian.
2 questions. One, can you say where the knife came from?
No, I couldn't.
Did he bring it into the house, or did he get it at the house? Can you say?
I couldn't do that, and it's not that I'm trying to be obstructionist. I want to ensure the integrity of this criminal justice process. This is obviously a huge case with every case we bring, but I am not going to run the risk of doing anything to taint this case as it proceeds forward. Yes, ma'am.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Different question, though.
You got it.
Can you say anything about the suspect, once he got to his own house, did he raise are you aware if he raised any alarm with his family? Can you say anything about how or where you found him later in the day so that you could charge him with attempted aggravated arson?
My only response to that is, in terms of that aggravated arson that was filed last week, we allege that there were family members inside, or else we wouldn't have charged it as an aggravated arson. But in terms of the question about whether he had intended or attempted to murder his own family, I don't believe at this point in time there's any evidence to indicate that. our theory and belief that he was going to get his family out all the time, and as I mentioned, that the fire at his home served two purposes. One was to destroy evidence that he retained and brought back from the Colts Neck crime scene, and the other was to create some type of a ruse or an appearance that his larger or overall family was somehow targeted. Yes, sir, in the back.
Is there any evidence that Paul and Keith had any kind of physical altercation, obviously beyond the shots that were fired outside the home? Was there any fight between the two? Any evidence, obviously, on the surviving member there?
I couldn't comment on that. I'm sorry. I couldn't confirm or deny it. Alex.
From the outside looking in, it appears that these two were successful. Can you speak more about the financials of the business? Did businesses doing well? Did they fall on hard times?
We're still working on that. I can't comment on it at this time. But if further announcements are necessary, whether it's by way of charges or through appearances in court on the public record, making statements thereto, you'll be able to glean the state's theory and how we're going to proceed on that motive therefrom. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about the circumstances in which Mr. Caneiro was arrested? Was he with his family? Was he trying to run away? Can you talk a little bit about how was he arrested?
The only thing I can comment on is that he was arrested without incident. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Is there any past known violence between these two brothers, whether at their homes or at their business?
Again, I couldn't even begin to get into past conduct, so I can't confirm or deny that. I'm not allowed to comment on that. Yes, ma'am.
Has the defendant shown any remorse for allegedly killing his own family members?
You know, he's represented by counsel. Our communications are not capable as a result. I would direct that question to his legal counsel. Yes, sir.
Have you been able to trace the gun directly to him? And what evidence was there that really connected him to this crime? Was there something really specific?
Listen, I understand the question. I'm sure I understand the appetite for that information in the public and the media. I just can't comment on the quantum of proof and the evidence that we have. That's something that's going to have to save for a later day. The only thing I can say is we are quite confident in our proofs, or else we wouldn't have charged this case. Art.
Mr. Prosecutor, is the vehicle that the defendant used to travel to and from the two homes in evidence, and is there blood in it?
I can't confirm or deny that, Art, for the reason I just gave this gentleman. Yes, sir.
Can you talk at all about how he got the brother outside? Because that's where he allegedly shot and killed him. I mean, did he yell? Did he knock on the door? Is there any sense about how that played out?
None that I can comment on today. Yes, sir. Alex.
New Jersey's not a death penalty state, but do you feel he deserves a death penalty if the allegations are proven true, if he's convicted of these allegations?
So here's what I think about that. Obviously, I only enforce the law. I don't make it. But if that was a possible sentence in the state of New Jersey, the only thing I can say is that I would have certified this case as a capital case. But again, that is not my job here.
Can you tell us, sir, when the business was started at least, how long they were together in this partnership?
No, I don't even know the answer to that as I stand here today, but I couldn't comment on it if I did. Just two more, please. Yes, ma'am.
So Paul Caneiro shows up at Keith Caneiro's house. Do you know if he knocked on the door, was there an argument inside, and then the brothers went outside and it continued and just spilled over? Or do you think he went there with the sole purpose of killing his brother?
Listen, I wish I could comment on that. It's a fair question. And like I said, I understand the appetite and interest for something like that in the public. I can't go there at this point in time. We have theories and answers and thoughts on this entire investigation, a much deeper dive that I'm unable to share with you today. I just can't go so far as to share it with the public extrajudicially like this. It has to be for the courtroom. Yes, ma'am.
Given the nature of the crime, are you expecting him to be held without bail tomorrow?
Well, let's put it this way. The state will definitely be seeking detention, which means we want him remanded pending trial until these charges are resolved.
Last question.
Yes, Brian.
Can you please describe any injuries found, any burn marks, whatever, found on Mr. Paul Caneiro?
No, I couldn't comment on that.
Any particular reason? Did
So-
you find him in an injured state?
Listen, all of those types of questions, that all ties in to the evidence that we might or might not present at a future criminal prosecution. And again, the goal here is not for me to be obstructionist. I understand the public's interest in this. I'm doing the best that I can. The last,
You can't say why he did it, but do you think you have an idea of why he did this?
yes, as I mentioned, our theory and our belief is that the motive was financial in nature. That's the best that I can do
More
at this point in time.
specifically, do you really think evidence, you have all this,
Yes,
you think you have a really good idea specifically why you did it.
we do, but again, I'm not going to jump to conclusions because it's going to require a thorough investigation. The last thing I'll say to you is I had a chance to meet with the extended members of the Caneiro family, and naturally you can imagine the turmoil and the confusion and the pain and struggle that they're going through. I would just ask members of the media and public on that family's behalf to please give them their privacy. And with that, I, again, just follow us on our social media and news platforms. We'll do our best to try to update you. Next appearance is tomorrow at 9 a.m. in this particular case, and I wish you all happy holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Go back to the room. Good.